Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So Labour's anti-Semitism row exploded spectacularly in public today as an MP confronted the former London Mayor Ken Livingstone in front of a phalanx of camera crews at Westminster. Mr Livingstone has angered Labour colleagues by invoking the policies of Adolf Hitler in defence of the suspended MP Naz Shah. The incident ended with Mr Livingstone himself suspended from the party and his assailant warned as to his future conduct. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn tonight denied that there was a crisis in the party. Our political correspondent Michael Crick has this report.
And I wholeheartedly apologise.
Yesterday, the MP Naz Shah was suspended by Labour and apologised to MPs for suggesting on social media 2 years ago that Israel should be moved en bloc from the Middle East to the US. But today, Jeremy Corbyn's close friend Ken Livingstone made Labour's crisis far worse when he tried to defend Shah on the radio. She'd gone over the top, he said, but wasn't anti-Semitic.
Let's remember, when Hitler won his election in 1932, his policy then was that Jews should be moved to Israel. He was supporting Zionism. His boy went mad and ended up killing 6 million Jews. But the simple fact in all of this is that Naz made these comments at a time when there's another brutal Israeli attack on the Palestinians.
Hitler and Zionism, two of the most emotive words in politics. In recent months, many Labour MPs have contained their anger with Livingstone, but things exploded this lunchtime when MP John Mann turned up to the Westminster TV studios at the same time as the former mayor.
Why don't you go and check the history? A Nazi apologist. You're a disgusting Nazi apologist, Livingstone. And you dare say that Hitler supported Zionism. You've lost it, mate. You need help. You need help. What did Mein Kampf say about Zionism?
Hitler's a mad anti-Zionist. He wanted to kill all Jews. But his policy in 1932, when he won that election, was to deport Germany's Jews to Israel. And the Zionist movement had secret meetings with this administration talking about that.
But in every argument on the internet, everything goes back to Hitler.
So who's right? We put it to the distinguished war historian, Anthony Beevor.
Is it historical fact, Anthony Beevor?
Well, it is grotesque to pretend that the most obsessive anti-Semite in history was a Zionist. But there was an element of truth in the sense that there were contacts between Zionists in Israel, the Haganah, and the Nazi administration, particularly Eichmann. And Eichmann even went to Israel in November 1937 to see about the mass emigration. Hitler then vetoed the whole idea. He was not going to have anything to do with the strengthening or foundation of a Jewish state. So any question of saying that Hitler was a Zionist is preposterous.
Just minutes after Livingstone's row with John Mann, Labour's current London mayoral contender Sadiq Khan condemned him outright.
These comments are appalling and they're disgusting. What needs to happen clearly is action taken.
What sort of action?
Well, I think, there should be no place in the Labour Party for anybody with these views.
So he should be expelled?
The due process needs to follow, but I think it's quite clear that there are too many examples in our party of people with anti-Semitic views where action isn't taken quickly enough.
Thanks.
While Khan took the Livingstone issue head on,
are you going to suspend Ken Livingstone, Mr Corbyn?
The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, on a visit to Grimsby, repeatedly refused to comment.
You're not going to suspend Ken Livingstone then? Are his remarks acceptable? Sorry, that's enough.
Time to apologise, Mr Livingstone.
Ken Livingstone showed no signs of contrition, gave no hint of an apology and was losing friends rapidly. The left-wing fixer John Landsman tweeted that a period of silence from Livingstone was overdue. It's time he quit politics altogether, he wrote.
MPs have said you should resign now.
They need to check whether what I've said is historically true.
Right. Minutes later, Labour suspended Ken Livingstone from party membership and its national executive. It's all fuel for the party's opponents ahead of next week's elections, and it was quickly seized by the PM.
Anti-Semitism is like racism. It is unacceptable in a modern political party, and every political party facing this problem has got to deal with it. And as I said to Jeremy Corbyn some weeks ago, when I was shouted down in the House of Commons with cries of disgraceful from the Labour benches, they got a problem. It's now totally apparent they got a problem, and they got to deal with it.
I haven't offended anybody. I've stated a historical fact. No, expelled. Jeremy's worked to deal with it very rapidly.
It was almost 4 hours before Jeremy Corbyn finally said anything.
There were very grave concerns about the language he used in the interview this morning. We had a discussion about it and decided we'd suspend him and he would go through an investigation by the party on this matter. Anybody that thinks this party is not cracking down on anti-Semitism is simply wrong.
Meanwhile, a man suspended an Israeli flag from Ken Livingstone's door. His suspension may be much more permanent. Well, what an extraordinary day. I think it's the day probably we've seen the end of Ken Livingstone as a senior Labour figure, or we may get his membership restored. And frankly, there are then those on the left who'll be glad to see him go, who feel he hasn't been a great friend of Jeremy Corbyn these last few months. But this, of course, is all part of the underlying civil war that's been going on in the Labour Party since last summer. The Blairites, many of whom are very sympathetic to Israel, fear a lot of anti-Semitism on the left. Those around Corbyn feel that they're the victims of an attempt to destabilise the leadership. And it could be worse. I mean, there were those in Jeremy Corbyn's office today arguing that John Mann too should be suspended. I think there would have been outcry amongst MPs if that had happened. And all this just 7 days before Labour fights elections throughout Britain.
Michael Crick in Westminster. Back now to our main news tonight. The row in the Labour Party over anti-Semitism and the suspension of Ken Livingstone. We did ask Jeremy Corbyn for an interview and asked the Labour Party for an official spokesman, but no one was available. We're joined now by John Woodcock, the Labour MP for Barrow and Furness, and the Labour Party activist and journalist Michael Segeloff. John Woodcock, is there a crisis in the Labour Party?
It's been a horrible day, an awful day, and shocking for, I think, all Labour members who come into politics to change things for the better and absolutely abhor the kind of anti-Semitic rhetoric and things that have been bandied around. So this need not be a crisis. This can now be everyone in the Labour Party, from the leader downwards, taking the opportunity to recognise that what has happened has been awful, and that there is an issue with anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and us all working together to tackle it.
Michael Segeloff, you are a rejoiner, and you're a Corbynista, one could say. Is there a crisis in the Labour Party? What do you think is going on?
I wouldn't say there's a crisis. I think what we've seen today from Ken Livingstone and from Naz Shah yesterday, the news that came through, there's certainly anti-Semitism, and it's right that they've had the whips taken away and that Ken Livingstone's been suspended. But I wouldn't argue anti-Semitism is a problem on the left any more than anywhere else. And in fact, as a Jewish Labour Party member and someone who attends anti-fascist demonstrations fairly regularly, I see the problem of fascism and Nazism, neo-Nazis in this country is coming from the far right, and it'd be much more important, rather than just getting over-excited and over-angry over these issues, that we see people like John out on the streets fighting Nazism and fascism where it rears its head.
I think, and no one is saying that the anti-Semitism is unique to the left. Of course it isn't. And Hitler and fascism comes from the far right. Where I think there has been a concern, and interested to see what your thoughts on this are, is that there is a particular strand within the hard left, not all of it by any means, and certainly not anything like the majority of Jeremy Corbyn supporters, of course not, but a particular strand who has been associated with, over the decades, with Soviet Russia, and saw the way that the Soviet Union turned violently anti-Semitic in the years after the Second World War, that has harboured anti-Semitism. And I think a concern with, clearly, what is a growing number of anti-Semitic incidents within the Labour Party, is that some of those people now think there is an opening within the Labour Party caused by Jeremy Corbyn being elected. Now, that is wrong, And I very much would think that Jeremy Corbyn would abhor that as well. But I think it's really
let's
important
get Michael's response
that
to
they
that
do.
analysis.
Well, I would say that the two cases we're referencing today, Naz Shah, an MP who made comments a few years ago, who certainly I don't think you're suggesting comes from that faction of the party, and Ken Livingstone, a long-standing member of the party. So it does sort of feel like this is a chance, an opportunity for someone like John to dig into Jeremy's leadership and its members who've joined recently, when actually these two cases don't come from that at all.
Well, look, what we've got...
Well, hang on, let's
sure.
just pick up that particular charge. Is this really part of an assault on Jeremy Corbyn's leadership?
No, absolutely. I mean, these are... I think there are many Jewish members, and it's really good you're not one of them, but I talk to many of them, I'm a former Labour friend of Israel, who are deeply concerned by what has been happening.
But can this be quantified? I mean, when you say that there is a lot of anti-Semitism in the party, where do we see it?
Well, I'd like to see the Labour Party releasing the figures of complaints, which it has, and putting a number on the number of complaints and that are anti.
Do you have any sense of how big that number is?
I don't know in terms of quantity.
I
might have a. Well, clearly these things are recorded, and my clear sense is that number is significantly growing. But I think it will be helpful.
But do you think in this instance Corbyn has acted swiftly? I mean, he seems to have been slightly wavering yesterday, but very decisive over Ken Livingstone today.
I'm worried by the reports, I have to say, I'm worried by the reports that suggested that initially he wanted to see John Mann suspended alongside, which, you know, for all you may say that John Mann was aggressive at the time, but the idea of an equivalence between equating with remarks about Hitler and aggressively confronting that, I think would be horrific.
Michael.
Well, I'm not here to talk about John Mann, I'm here to talk about anti-Semitism. And once again here we've had John telling us that there's a problem with anti-Semitism on the left and in the Labour Party, and yet you can't quantify it in numbers. And again, speaking to my own experiences being in the Labour Party, being of the left, I've never experienced anti-Semitism.
Have you ever been in a setting when you've experienced it within the Labour Party?
No, not in the Labour Party, but certainly only in Dover 2 weeks ago, a neo-Nazi fascist march where I had various slurs raised at me and saw people making kind of fascist salutes. So I feel like the priority should be that, shouldn't it?
Well, I mean, Michael, I don't do this for fun. This is a horrible day for the Labour Party, and we really feel it. When you have a figure like Ken Livingstone, who, whatever you think about him, has been a senior figure for a long, long time, saying stuff like that. Naz Shah, with whom I've had a huge amount of respect for what she took for George Galloway. I mean, we don't do this for fun. We really think there is a significant problem, and we want this
final word.
Once again, you haven't told us where these numbers come from to argue that there is a mass problem. Just two instances which you both accept are anti-Semitic.
Well, we seem to agree we need to know the figures. We'll be pushing for this too.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, both of you, very warmly. Thank you.
I've been getting away with